What's up, guys? Welcome into the Wolverine.com live recruiting show. I am your host, EJ Holland. Alongside me is my co-host, Zach Libby. And today we have a very special episode. We are going to do a recruiting draft for the second straight year. Before we do that, though, I want to make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's completely free, and you can get notified every time we drop a new video, which is pretty frequent with all the ongoing changes and recruiting starting to pick up and all that good stuff. And also subscribe to the Wolverine.com today if you want more insider information that you're not satisfied with just the YouTube content. You can head over to the Wolverine.com for exclusive insider recruiting information, team information, basketball recruiting, and so much more at the Wolverine.com. And you see a ton of recruiting stories coming out of the week and all the coaching changes and things like that. So head over to the Wolverine.com and subscribe today for just $1 for 1 month. All right, Zach, last year we did the recruiting draft and I dominated, of course, defeating Zach. I think it was a record like 85 to 15%, and people were feeling bad for Zach, so they gave him some sympathy votes, but it was a landslide defeat. Since Zach lost last year pretty bad, he gets the first pick this year. So are you excited about that, Zach?
I feel like Birdman in that Fire Flame music video, just rubbing my hands. Been waiting for this all year. I need redemption, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Before we start the draft, this is the kind of rule set for the draft, or the guidelines that Zach tried to defy last year, as we all know. It's 7-on-7, but with linemen. So if you ever played NFL Street, you have linemen in NFL Street, even though it's 7-on-7. So it's 3 offensive linemen, quarterback, a running back, and 2 pass catchers. So you can get a receiver. You can go with 2 tight ends like Zach did last year. On the defensive side of the ball, you have 3 defensive linemen, and that can be a mixture of anything: defensive line, edge, 1 linebacker, and then 3 defensive backs. So yeah, that's kind of the draft style. No real questions tonight, unless you guys want to hop into the draft with a super chat. You can click that little money symbol that allows you to ask a question on tonight's show as we are drafting. If you think some of Libby's picks are terrible, you can just leave a comment with a super chat and you can display that on the screen. All right, Zach, you get the first pick, and this is snake draft. So Zach will get a pick, and then I'll get back to back, and then it'll go back to Zach. You know, if you play fantasy football, you know what snake draft is. That's what we're doing. Zach, you are on the clock with the number 1 overall selection today.
Yeah, first one I'm going to pick is Marquise Davis on 300, athlete out of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. A kid who rushed for 2,400 yards this past season, 34 touchdowns, 5'11", 200 pounds. Just, I've seen him in person twice. A muscular frame, an explosive ball carrier, able to hit the hole hard and just create plays in the open field. He has a very humble mentality, but you can see on the field that he's a leader and a dog. Former co-defense coordinator Steve Klingscale was really high on Marquise. That was an area that Klingscale had, and Davis was one of the guys that was a big priority for Klingscale. And he's the one who won Gatorade Player of the Year for State of Ohio. So I'm gonna go with arguably the best offensive prospect that Michigan has on the board for my number 1 pick.
Very interesting selection from Zach right out of the bat. If you would have told me guess Zach's number 1 pick, I definitely would never have guessed Marquise Davis. I love Marquise Davis, though, just to give, kind of my take on it. It's probably a bad pick, but it's a good pick at the same time because Marquise is electrifying. I've said on this show before that I think Marquise may be a better prospect than Jordan Marshall, beating out Marshall for Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Ohio as a junior. So that tells you, how good he is on the offensive side of the ball. Also offers position flexibility, can line up on the defensive side at linebacker or safety. So it's a really exciting prospect. One of my, personal favorites in 2025. So again, a bad pick, but a good pick for Zach. A bold strategy, I will say. All right. I am going with, my first round pick and my first selection will be DJ Pickett, obviously 5-star, the most important target on Michigan's board. I would have picked him had I had the number 1 overall pick. So getting him here in the 2 spot is great. He's listed as the number 1 safety in the country, but this is a guy that can play corner as well. Really, really special length. I mean, you look at his wingspan and it's outstanding. I saw him at Battle Miami recently. I also had a chance to see him in game in the fall, but recently at Battle Miami, going up against elite receivers, he was strictly playing corner. Whereas, in the fall, I saw him strictly play safety, but at corner, man, he completely locked down his side of the field. He can be that tall, long, physical corner that Michigan traditionally has success with. And on top of that, he has plenty of speed too. I believe he ran in the 10.6s last year as a junior. So to have that combination at 6'3", 170 of length and speed and physicality, I think Pickett's just the total package. He can even play wide receiver if you need him to as well. Michigan's had him on campus a number of times. His mom went to Michigan. His grandmother lives in the Detroit metro. Losing Klink was a bit of a blow for his recruitment, but, and there's no pre-existing relationship with Lamar Morgan. But yeah, I think that, right now Michigan's probably going to have to put some work back in, but the family ties are really strong. And, he's obviously the most important target on the board for a reason. So DJ Pickett is my pick. So yeah, I'm going to highlight him here so I don't lose track. My next pick, so my first pick of the second round, will give me a clear advantage. And I am going with quarterback commit Carter Smith. That leaves Zach with kind of a barren desert of quarterbacks that aren't really on the board. So, I'm going with Carter Smith. Aside from just giving me a clear advantage at the quarterback position, I think that Carter is also just a phenomenal player. And I've said that, many times. I think at this point last year, Jaden Davis had more height than Carter Smith did, but you saw Jaden Davis kind of tumble in the rankings. Carter Smith, there's nowhere to go but up for him. He's not nearly as polished of a passer as Davis, but the upside is so exciting. This is a guy that's a true dual threat. I mean, rushed for more than 700 yards last year, was the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Florida, actually beating out Pickett and the number 1 2024 overall recruit in Jeremiah Smith, who's going to Ohio State. So to win Gatorade Player of the Year in in Florida, I mean, it's just insane. Like, you don't see juniors win Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Florida as an underclassman. So Carter Smith, had a fantastic junior year. He's 6'3", 180. The measurables are there, and just a rocket arm too. I mean, this is a guy that threw in the 90s as a baseball player and was a legitimate baseball player as well. This will be his first full offseason working with a quarterbacks coach. So just so exciting, man. Yeah, Carter has an exciting ceiling and a scary floor, but man, if he hits that ceiling, he's going to be a really, really fun player to watch in Ann Arbor, and just a great kid too. I'm excited to have the Pickett, Carter Smith, Floridian combination there, giving me an exciting playmaker on offense and giving me the best defensive player on the board there. So Zach will come back with 2 picks of his own.
You drafted a 5-star. I need to draft a 5-star. I'm going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. I need an offensive tackle that can block for Marquise Davis to open up the hole in order for DJ Pickett to chase around Marquise Davis. But I'm going to go with David Sanders, the number 2 overall prospect in the 2025 recruiting class, according to the industry ranking. Out of Providence Day, a former teammate of Shane Goodwin and Jaden Davis. David Sanders visited Michigan for the July barbecue at the Big House. Sherrone Moore has stopped by Providence Day during the January contact period. For a school like Michigan who celebrates offensive line success, David Sanders fits the bill of just a freak athlete and just having such a high physical ceiling, 6'5", 250 to 270 pound range. The measurables are off the charts. I mean, he runs a 4.8 40-yard dash, 36-inch arms. As a player, I've seen him practice, seen him get a strong punch. He throws his hips into the blocks. He gets off the line really well. And he's just a really intelligent and just affluent kid. Someone that, that fits the bill of Michigan's culture. Not only that, he has really, really deep connections to Michigan, besides the fact that he's close with Jane Davis and Shannon Goodwin. Providence Day's offensive line coach, Jonathan Goodwin, played for Michigan in the late 90s. It's a tough race, but Michigan is still trying to stay in contention of this. The Southern schools, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, they are rightfully prioritizing a guy of his attributes. But again, Michigan has found ways to develop offensive linemen into NFL prospects. So, we'll see how that happens, now with Grant Newsome, who moved from tight ends to offensive line in command. We'll see what they can do this offseason to garner momentum for a kid like him. So now I have the third pick. My strategy is still ongoing. It's still coming to plan.
Good God.
I need a wide receiver. And why not get the top wideout on Michigan's board, Andrew Marsh out of Texas. This is a kid that wide receivers coach Ron Bellamy has done phenomenal work in terms of building a relationship with Marsh. It's led to 2 visits from the Texan to Ann Arbor, with the July barbecue this past year. And then during the spring eval period in late May, Marsh actually took part in a Sound Mind, Sound Body camp the day after he visited Michigan for the first time. And, I was able to see him, go through drills and go through one-on-ones. And, this is a kid who just displays elite footwork. He has the speed. He can get in and out of his breaks so well. He was in a group I remember with like Boo Carter and just elite wideouts nationally. You can see how well he's able to separate himself from the pack. I think one of the best things about Andrew Marsh is just his ability to catch balls in these tight windows. No pass is too difficult for a kid like him. But, having Ron Bellamy back in the fold, wide receiver recruiting just feels, it doesn't have this reset button compared to other positions. And, Bellamy has deep ties in the state of Texas. He has a relationship with Margin Hooks, a top recruiting trainer out there. But, for a kid of his stature, to visit twice and, to continue to show interest, it shows that Bellamy is not giving up and, making sure that all the right buttons are pushed so far for Michigan to stay in this race. So, yeah, I have the top 50 wide receiver and a 5-star offensive tackle. So that was a good snake part of the draft for me. I'm very proud.
Yeah, Zach finally picked a wide receiver, so everybody should congratulate him after his 2 tight end draft last year. All right, I'm just going to load up in the secondary. 2025 is an extremely talented class for players on the back end. That makes Klink's departure hurt a little bit more, and Lamar Morgan not having any pre-existing relationships with these guys. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It's such a big position of need. There's so much talent back there. It's going to be interesting to see how Lamar Morgan does as a recruiter. He has to step up right away, and I'm sure he'll get some assistance from Sherrone Moore. And my pick here, Sherrone Moore actually saw this guy while he was out recruiting, and that is Dorian Brew. Close to 5-star corner, can play safety as well. So I already have a corner safety in Pickett. I have a corner safety in Brew. You get 3 players on the back end. So I think that, having that, loaded secondary with Pickett and Brew, shutting down things at corner, moving one back to safety, gives me a lot of flexibility. He's the number 23 overall recruit in the country. He's a heavy Ohio State lean, but remember, Brew was set to commit earlier this winter, and he pushed things back. Michigan's in his top 5. The Wolverines are expected to get a visit at some point this offseason. And like I said, Sherrone Moore personally stopped by to see him out in Houston. And, he's kind of a bigger guy, 6'1", 200. You look at Pickett, he's kind of that tall, lanky guy. Brew's just really filled out, can come downhill as a safety and be extremely physical, can lock things down as a corner. So I think Brew and, Pickett give me some flexibility in the secondary. And then I'm taking a true shutdown corner as well. I'm just loading up the big 3 in the secondary for me. Chris Ewald is my other guy. Former Michigan commit, has stated on numerous occasions that Michigan is still in it. So, Chris Ewald, top 100 corner out of Miami, Chaminade, Madonna, very much resembles, what Will Johnson was like in high school. Very patient, elite technique, great feet, great ball skills, not necessarily a super speedy, explosive athlete, and Will wasn't either, but, they make up for it with just the length, the physicality, and just the football IQ and knowledge of the game, things of that nature. That's what makes Chris Ewald special. And, Chris brings some of that swagger, Mr. 305. He already has chemistry with DJ Pickett. They talked about playing together at Michigan in the past. So, you give me a secondary of DJ Pickett, Chris Ewald, and Dorian Brew with Zach not having a quarterback. I mean, they're going to have to run Marquise Davis 50 times per game because, they're going to get shut down here on my back end. So, yeah, DJ Pickett, Chris Ewald, Dorian Brew. That completes my secondary already early in this draft. So I will throw it back to you, Zach, for your 2 picks.
I need another wide receiver. If you're going to have that loaded of a secondary, I need to load up in my playmakers. So I'm not going to make the same mistake that I made last year. One guy that you personally have covered, you have seen him in game. One that is in an area in which Michigan has landed a recruit in every single recruiting cycle since 2019, Chicagoland. Watching his film, watching your highlights of him, you have to go with someone like Talon Taylor out of Geneva, Illinois. This is a kid who is a deep threat. He's athletic to catch those 50-50 balls. His catch radius is outstanding. As I mentioned, he's an outside threat, but he's also dangerous with his feet. You see him doing end arounds, jet sweeps. So when the ball is in his hands, all eyes need to be locked in on Taylor. It's another guy, Ron Bellamy, to his credit, he is making sure that the top wide receivers in the 2025 recruiting class have interest in Michigan. With Taylor, he comes from a 7-on-7 group called Midwest Boom, which has produced guys like 2024 signee Josiah Edmond, 2024 signee Amarion Stewart, past guys like JJ McCarthy and Tyler Morris. There's just for a kid like him too, he's been to the Ohio State game for a visit. He's able to see the atmosphere of the Big House in such a high profile game and for that win too. But, he's been on an off-season visit. So as I mentioned, Ron Bellamy, staying put for this 2024 season, there's continuity there. And that means the recruiting board for the wide receiver group is staying as well. Having a quarterback commit as well, Carter Smith with such a huge ceiling in terms of his starting mechanics, I think You can continue having him as an assistant in terms of going after wide receivers. And Talon Taylor is obviously a guy that Michigan needs to continue to prioritize. So that gives me 2 wide receivers.
That means I don't have to draft a wide receiver until late. And you didn't even draft the best wide receiver on the board. Megan actually pulled it up, our producer. She pulled it up below because she thought you were going to take him and you didn't. So even Megan would be better at drafting at this point.
I'm a really nice guy, and you have pumped the brakes on that kid for months. So I don't want to take him away from you.
All right.
I'm a really nice guy.
Okay. I think you still have another pick. Let's see where you go. What direction you go in here?
I have a couple. There's a few, you've drafted defensive backs. None of the guys that I want. I'm joking, but I have 3 guys in mind already. For having such an elite, the best offensive tackle prospect that the high school football recruiting scene has seen in years, plus the best player in Ohio, according to Gatorade. I want to continue to beef up my offensive line. I want someone to be next to David Sanders, who has the accolades, who Michigan and Sherrone Moore and Grant Newsom heavily prioritize as well. I'm going to go with S.J. Alfatuli out of Las Vegas Bishop Gorman, 6'3", 290 pounds. This is a kid who both Moore and Newsom have stopped by to see in person. If anyone doesn't know, S.J. Alfatuli is one of 3 offensive linemen from Bishop Gorman to have an offer. The others are Douglas Utu and Alai Kilani Valu. SJ is the highest ranked among them. I have seen him live in game. It is clear as to why a school like Bishop Gorman is the reigning Max Preps national champions. It is unfair when you watch such an elite offensive line with such pristine chemistry work together. Over this past season, during their undefeated run, they accumulated over 5,000 total yards of offense, including 22 yards of rushing. That, along with the fact that Michigan has a running back signing from Bishop Gorman and Micah Kaapana, who, you see what a guy like Kaapana can do on, behind an offensive line. So when he gets to Michigan, there's a lot of excitement to see what he can do with more development. But, SJ specifically, he was there for the Ohio State game. He and his family flew a red eye from Las Vegas to Ann Arbor in order to go see that game. Again, for Moore and Newsom to visit Sin City during the January contact period means, they're making the effort now in order for results to come when it's time to sign. So, I am overly ecstatic to have a kid like SJ and David Sanders lining up next to each other to block for Marquise Davis. So good luck tackling that.
All right. So I need an offensive lineman. I'm going with Andrew Babalola out of Kansas. Sherrone Moore is from the state of Kansas and made his way out there to see Babalola during the contact period. He's one of the nation's premier offensive tackles. It's a really strong year for interior offensive linemen. So I felt like I needed a true tackle. And if I couldn't get David Sanders, I think Babalola was the next best in that regard. He is set to make his first visit to Michigan in March. You don't see Michigan on the On3 recruiting prediction machine because he hasn't visited, but I think the Wolverines will have a really good shot after he visits. Obviously a lot to sell with 2 Joe Moore awards in 3 years, Sherrone Moore now being the head coach, having that Kansas connection. So, I needed an offensive lineman, and Babalola was clearly the best guy left on the board. Next up for me, I need a defensive lineman / edge. And I'm going with the highest ranked recruit on that board, and that's Nathaniel Marshall, top 100 edge out of Chicagoland. Nathaniel is another kid that Sherrone Moore personally visited during the contact period. I had a chance to go out and see him practice during the fall, and just a really interesting prospect that can play with his hand in the dirt. He can stand up. You see Notre Dame is considered the slight favorite there, but he did visit Michigan twice last year, including for the game against Ohio State. There's already familiarity with new defensive line coach Greg Scruggs, who offered him at Wisconsin. So, Nathaniel Marshall to me is a no-brainer, the number 24 ranked prospect in the country overall, with Marshall, Babalola, Dorian Brew, DJ Pickett. That's 4 top 30 guys already on my team. So, I feeling pretty good about my 2 picks. So throwing it back to Zach.
No, you have 2 of the. Oh wait, you have no. Wait, I'm sorry. That's right.
I have 4 top 30 players right now. So it's great. Feeling good.
To be fair, at this point last year, I was so down about my picks, but like I kind of gave up at that point. But I think that's kind of the beauty of our jobs or what we do, right? Like, we've seen these guys live, we see what they can do in person. We don't just base our evaluations off of huddles. So I feel like we've seen all these guys that we've talked about, and we are able to give true evaluations, and that's why we feel good about both of our teams. But you went with an edge, I want to go with an edge, and the clear guy that I have seen live, who I needed just 24 minutes to see live, and immediately I was like, this is a must land for Michigan, regardless of the fact that every single Michigan defensive assistant from this past season has left for the NFL. This is a kid that Michigan, under this new staff, needs to pick up the pieces quickly, because schools like Notre Dame and others are capitalizing off their prolonged pushes. But Damian Shanklin out of Indianapolis Warren Central, as I mentioned, I saw him at his playoff game. I had to leave at halftime. However, by that half, he had 7 total tackles, including 2 for a loss. Ultimately, he had 12 total tackles. But this is a kid with such a rare combination of speed and finesse. Just a kid who plays with his hand in the dirt at all times, but finds a way to get in the backfield just based on an array of moves, his ability to bend, dip, get in and out. It's just, I'm just so impressed that the way he's developing at this stage, and it's only going to get better, especially if he enters a system like Michigan, which has produced a litany of edge rushers to the NFL. This is a kid who visited for the Ohio State game. He actually was supposed to go for the Purdue night game, but ultimately he rescheduled. He had a great relationship with Dylan Roney, former pass rush specialist for Michigan. Now that he and Mike Elston are gone, Greg Scruggs from Wisconsin is soon to be announced as the next hire. Damian Shanklin has a offer from Wisconsin. We'll see how that shapes up. But this is a kid that, if you're going to pull a kid out of Indianapolis and, keep that Midwest vibe and, ultimately beat out a school like Notre Dame, this is a kid to do it. I am just impressed with the way, his trajectory could be under a pristine conditioning, strength development program. So I'm going to go with Shanklin. And then I'm going to finish up my offensive line. I think you kind of know how I'm going to go with things. We're a run first team with deep threat, third down potential. I'm going to stay in state. We're going to add an in-state flavor to this team. Avery Gash out of Birmingham Groves, a kid who, if we talked about Bryce Underwood in the past as a prospect in Metro Detroit that Michigan just couldn't let leave, Avery Gash is now that guy. He is the number one priority on the offensive line board for 2025. He is someone who heard from Sherrone Moore the day Sherrone Moore got hired as head coach. This is a kid who saw both Sherrone Moore and Newsome stop by multiple times during the January contact period. Grant Newsome has stated to Gash as to why he's the number one guy because of his versatility. This is a guy who can play tackle. He currently starts at right tackle for Groves. He could slide inside to play guard. He could play a swing in college, but he's not the highest guy on the board. For on the On3 industry ranking, but there's more to it than just what you see from the eye test. He, based on what he can bring to the table, he's just a mean kid, a mauler, a guy who finishes blocks, a guy who looks to prove as to why he's the number one overall offensive tackle or offensive lineman in the class. I have seen him live. He showed great reps, against Colorado defensive line signee Brandon Davis Swain. I've seen him in multiple times in camp setting. He's improving his pass protection, but as a run blocker, he is someone that you are just wowed by. Michigan recognizes that as well. They have brought him in for 3 game day visits this past season, including the Ohio State game. He has an open invite for the spring camp practice, which that is set to happen at some point. But again, Newsome and Moore are making sure that every resource is put into making sure that a school like Ohio State or Penn State or Georgia or Wisconsin don't take this kid away from Michigan. So, for someone too like him who's going to commit after official visits, there's still months away, but Michigan's doing everything in power to keep him in state.
Cool. Neither guy was on my board, so don't really care about Zach's picks. There are many better players out there than the guys Zach picked, and I will now have the luxury of waiting till the end to draft a wide receiver, to draft a running back, and to draft an offensive lineman. So, as I continue to dominate Zach in this year's draft, I will shape up my defensive line here. I'm going with another top 100 recruit. I already drafted an edge. I need a true defensive lineman. So I'm going with Ethan Utley out of Nashville Ensworth. He's a guy I've seen in game twice, a teammate of Michigan signee Mason Curtis. There aren't a lot of, high level defensive linemen on the board right now. So we'll see how that changes with Greg Scruggs now taking over. But Utley is definitely one of the highest ranked. He's number 104 on the industry ranking, but number 44 on On3, so another top 50 player for me on On3 here. Utley released a top 5. Michigan was in that top 5. I expect him to make a return visit. He already has a pre-existing relationship with Scruggs, and Michigan could even get an assist here from new assistant Brian Jean-Mary. You see Tennessee was considered the leader. Brian Jean-Mary was obviously at Tennessee on the defensive side of the ball. That connection with Curtis is playing a big role. I think if Utley leaves the South, Michigan would probably be the spot. The Wolverines have done a fantastic job of recruiting the state of Tennessee in recent cycles. I think Brian Jean-Mary is going to continue to keep up that momentum. And, you look at Utley, 6'4", 275, just really athletic in the trenches. I think he's a guy that can easily get past Zach's offensive line, especially with them having to key on Nathaniel Marshall and my next pick. My next pick actually isn't that highly ranked, so I'm not just drafting the highest ranked players on the board.
It feels like you are. It feels like you are.
Well, that's because I am just dominating. I mean, Pickett's my guy. Carter's my guy. Chris Ewald's my guy. Jalen Williams is my guy as well. I think he's one of the more underrated recruits on On3, which has him as a 3-star. It's a little absurd. Jalen Williams is a bigger edge out of Chicagoland. He's a guy that I had a chance to see in the fall, and he was super impressive. In fact, I took Nathaniel Marshall first, but Jalen Williams was a little more impressive to me than Nathaniel Marshall was when I saw them both live the same week. Michigan, the heavy leader on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. He's listed at 6'5", 238. That is not updated at all. Like, Jalen Williams is at least 260 right now. He is a dude. He has a great relationship with new defensive line coach Greg Scruggs. It was kind of funny because after Mike Elston left, Jalen Williams was visibly upset. He tweeted out, "Change your predictions." And then Scruggs was hired and he was like, "Oh, never mind. Scruggs is great." And he gave us a great quote over at the Wolverines. So, another thing about my team that Zach's ignoring, thinking that I'm just taking the highest ranked guys, is there's chemistry here. Pickett and Carter Smith are friends. Pickett and Chris Ewald are friends. Nathaniel Marshall and Jalen Williams are friends. So I have chemistry all over my roster. Everybody gets along. Everybody's going to build off each other, and we're going to continue to dominate Zach. So my defensive line of Nathaniel Marshall, Ethan Utley, and Jalen Williams is a very nice trio. And all three, again, have familiarity with Greg Scruggs. So those are my back-to-back picks.
You're acting like my team's like the 2004 of Lakers. Like, we're just no chemistry. Like, come on. Linebacker, I'm surprised you didn't pick him, but I felt like I knew you were going to wait because it's only one guy.
It's only one guy.
One guy. There's a boatload of options at linebacker. I had a few picks. I didn't put your guy because I figured you were going to draft him, but I'm going to be a nice guy. I was a nice guy before, but I'm not now. I really like Kamar Archie. Kamar Archie, he is just one of those wrecking balls. Watching your highlights that when you went out there to the Hunt School in Princeton, I mean, there's just something in the water. When you look at guys like Cole Breeler, defensive lineman, Owen Wayfield, 2024 signee, the younger brother of Owen Wayfield, who has an offer. But Kamar Archie, man, like, he is someone that, Michigan has done a really good job of recruiting, despite the fact that they haven't had a linebackers coach before the expected announced hiring of Brian G. Mary since, mid-November. Chris Partridge, who had connections in the state of New Jersey, him and Kamar Archie had a great relationship, but, his absence still paved the way for Grant Newsome, who's the air recruiter for New Jersey, to, continue making inroads. That led to Kamar Archie making a visit that final weekend of the January contact period. And, Archie told the Wolverine and, you that, Grant Newsome and him have, established, a good connection so far, and he's looking forward to seeing what happens. But, player connections go a long way as well. Owen Wayfield is still there. He's not set to enroll until June. So, that's another assistance for Michigan to have. But, just for a kid like that, just run sideline to sideline, is able to come downhill, just a hard hitter. Based on your film that when you were out there, he's able to get skinny, get split offensive linemen. He's able to get in the way of balls, the direction of a ball when it's headed a certain direction. And, you always want an asset in pass coverage, especially in Michigan's multiple front defense. So I'm going to go with Kamar Archie as my linebacker. And then
Zach solely did that to spite me because I know that he had another linebacker higher than Archie on the board, which I will take, and that's fine. I'll bring some West Coast flavor, but that's for another time. Let's go ahead and get your next pick.
This is why we work great together, because we knew what our picks were beforehand. Because as soon as you said West Coast, you knew what my pick was going to be. All right, I'm gonna. I don't have a defensive back. I have my three guys ready to go, but all of them are from the state of Ohio, believe it or not. But the first one I'm gonna go with is Trey McNutt, top 100 out of Shaker Heights. McNutt, he's an interesting one. This is a kid with deep Ohio State legacies. His father and uncle played on that 2002 national championship team. His mother also attended Ohio State. But he, in interviews, especially with us, Trey has been sort of adamant that, he's making sure that his recruitment is kept open. That involves visiting Michigan twice. The first one was in May. Just one-on-one personalized experience on the Ann Arbor campus. The second one was for the Ohio State game in in late November. But Trey, he followed that national championship team closely. He was telling us just how impressed those defensive back play was, and that group, of Will Johnson, Josh Wallace, Makari Page, Rod Moore, they from who we've talked to, right? They those guys left such a deep contribution in terms of just defensive back interest in this class in 25. And it is such a loaded group, right? Like Pickett and Ewald and McNutt, like all these guys, top 100, 5 stars. Like Michigan did such a good job. And obviously Steve Clinkscale's departure, it's left the way for Lamar Morgan, defensive coordinator for Louisiana Lafayette. He comes in, he has a board of just just loaded talent. And he has little time, right? To pick up the pieces and making sure Michigan is still in contention with these guys. And Trey's one of them. He has said to us that, Clinkscale's like family. So that connection, it's hard to replace. But I think we're going to see how good of a recruiter Lamar Morgan is based on what, what's available and what the guys who have offers currently are. So we'll see what happens this offseason.
So again, Zach took Kamar Archie solely to spite me. I'm going to take his guy. In fact, just to tell you guys, Zach called me before I went to Battle Miami and was like, you have to talk to this kid. He's the greatest backer I've seen on film all year. Michigan really needs to land this guy. So again, Zach is already vouching for this pick, and that's Noah McHale out of California. And he was extremely impressive at Battle Miami and did live up to some of the hype that Zach put around him. You're talking about a kid who's just kind of that straight up inside backer at 6'2", 210, but just so well built. Like he looks like a guy that's ready to play in the Big Ten right now. And then, you're talking about seeing him in 7-on-7, and you're seeing such a big kid move as well as he does, as fluid as he is, to be able to drop back into coverage against some elite wide receivers and tight ends. This is a kid that's just really special. He's a top 50 recruit in the country. Michigan hosted him for a visit last year. He already has a relationship with Brian Jean-Mary from his time recruiting him at Tennessee. You see USC is the heavy favorite here, but USC obviously not great at developing defensive guys, and he's visited there a ton. I think he's really open to going pretty much anywhere across the country, and a school like Michigan makes a lot of sense for him. And like I said, he's already visited once in the past, so it's not like this is a guy that hasn't visited at all. And again, that relationship with Jean-Mary, I think, will help as well. So yeah, I'm completely fine with I am a little bitter about
don't
not being on my team, but Noah McHale is fantastic linebacker. So I am very happy, and I know Zach is sad that he decided to pull one of his cheater moves that he always does by spiting me. But anyway, next up, let's complete my actually, I only have one other pick here, so I'll just take my running back. Zach took Marquise Davis, so I'm going with the next highest back on Michigan's recruiting board, and that's Iverson Howard. You want some toughness on your team at the running back position. Look no further than the DMV that produced Blake Corum. Iverson Howard, kind of in that same mold, just has that kind of DMV type of mindset. He's a really tough kid. He's a tough runner, and he's fast too. His nickname's Rocket Howard, man. He's explosive. When I saw him in game this year, it was really clear the other team just kind of planned against him, but you see it all year on film. You see that combination of speed and just willingness to run between the tackles and put his head down and run you over. I mean, Rocket Howard's kind of that complete package. I see that he's only a 3-star here on the industry ranking, but 2 sites have him ranked as a top 200 back, including On3. And, he's been one of the big priorities. Everybody's always like, EJ, you're such a Mike Hart hater. Well, Mike Hart has made Iverson Howard a priority from like day one, dating back from like last year. And, I'm a hater on Mike Hart because he doesn't recruit as hard as he should. But I'm definitely not a hater on Mike Hart in terms of being able to evaluate guys early. And I think with Iverson Howard, it was a great early evaluation. And Howard has named Michigan his leader. And if Hart's back on staff, I expect the Wolverines to continue to trend the right way with him. So, great with Rocket. Excited to have him on my team.
So I need 2 more defensive backs. As I mentioned, I'm going to stay in the state of Ohio. If you're pumping up top 100 prospects, I'm going to add one. Dwayne Galloway out of Columbus, Marion Franklin. Galloway, he's, every recruiting cycle, you get these recruits that Michigan fans kind of latch themselves onto. Just, following them very closely, just very interested in hoping that they end up going to Michigan. But, Dwayne Galloway is one of those that's highly justified. From day one, as you mentioned with Mike Hart, with Iverson Howard, this is one that Steve Clinkscale was on early. For the backstory, Dwayne Galloway visited Michigan in June this past season, dominated testing, dominated the measurables, was by far the best cornerback and defensive back out of that camp setting. By September of last year, that's when Galloway's recruitment really picked up. You saw the SEC, you saw the Big 12, you saw the ACC, enter the mix. But Michigan was the second power, right after Georgia I got offered. That day after, Steve Clinkscale pulled the trigger too. They, as we've mentioned, Steve Clinkscale's connections in Ohio go to every single major city in that state. Dwayne Galloway is sort of an anomaly when it comes to Columbus, in comparison to the others. But, this is a kid who, A, doesn't have an Ohio State offer, and then B, Clinkscale wanted. It resulted in Galloway coming to Ann Arbor for the Purdue game. He afterwards, he's kind of, you kind of got the sense based on, intel that Michigan was in that top 5 in terms of just communication. Now that Steve Clinkscale's gone, we're going to see what Lamar Morgan can do again with just another guy right south of the border who has just, as I mentioned, elite measurables. I mean, we're talking about a guy who attended the LSU camp over the summer, and he posted a 4.39 40-yard dash. He is just electric in terms of speed. He's I've seen him in person. He's in that 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2" range. Just a kid with a chip on his shoulder, a guy who just kind of wants to prove himself in terms of just being the best, not only the best defensive back, but being the best player in the state of Ohio. And Michigan too has some assistants coming in with connections in Ohio, including Greg Scruggs, who's from Cincinnati, but landing a guy like Galloway, right, who attends a high school that's 10 minutes away from Ohio Stadium. I mean, that's huge. But yeah, he's one that, I can't say enough in terms of just how well he can do with just elite development and just be able to really hone in on the technique and everything. So I'm glad about that one. And then my second pick, you have a Michigan commit. I want a Michigan commit. I want a 3 technique on my defensive line. I have an edge rusher, but I want a 3 technique. Bobby Kanka out of Howell, he is, to his credit, he's been through a lot, right? Like he had a really good relationship with Mike Elston. They were really close. For a kid like him who saw a left of Sean Nua, it comes in Elston, they were able to build a really great relationship, over those years. And then, Kanka commits the barbecue at the big house, and Elston leaves soon after that national title. And, much like Carter Smith and Eli Owens, they're still in the fold. I guess the difference with Kenka is that, along with Elston, none of those defensive systems are gone. Jesse Minter played a big role in Kenka's early commitment as well. But, I've kind of grown to really liking just seeing what kind of progressions Kenka has made as, development wise. This past year, Kenka was about 260. Right now, he's 280. Just one of those, as you and I like to call them, just like those lunch pail kids, those guys who just go to work, put their heads down, let the work on the field do the talking. He has a projection to play as a 5 all the way down to a 3. He reminds me a lot of just someone like Ted Hammond, just a guy who has that versatility on the line, a really, really great kid off the field, but someone who just produces on the field. I think as he continues to grow too, he's 280 right now. If he continues to grow, it's interesting. Sherrone Moore was actually the first position coach to have kind of a relationship with Kenka. And, there's a possibility, he could blossom to 310, 320. So, if we see Bobby Kenka play on the offensive line, I wouldn't be a surprise. But right now, as that 3 technique, this is a guy who lives less than 30 minutes away from Ann Arbor. So he's able to see firsthand, practices and games and just what it takes for a guy like Kenneth Grant or Mason Graham to become bona fide first-round draft picks in 2025. So locking Kenka early was big. Having a guy who wants to play for Michigan, that's his dream. I think that's big. And, just finding a guy who's just going to continue to work with guys like Carter Smith and Eli Owens to find true characters and just guys who fit that culture of Michigan and make this 2025 class as best as it can. So looking forward to seeing just what Kenka could do this offseason as he continues to dominate the high school level.
Well, we have a super chat from Nick. He says, when is U of M adding the strippers for recruiting? So inappropriate, Nick, but he did super chat, so we have to show it. He paid good money. He can get his comment in.
You don't. You don't. You
don't. All right. Well, Zach took Bobby Kenka, and I'm going to take 2 guys that are just going to pancake and bully Bobby Kenka, put him in the dirt. I'm taking 2 fan favorites. I'm taking my interior guys. One is Michael Carroll, on 300 offensive lineman out of Pennsylvania, one of the highest ranked interior offensive line recruits on Michigan's board, and a loaded year at the position. Carroll is a son of a former Penn State player. His mom went to Michigan State, but there's a chance he ends up at Michigan. He's visited like 3 or 4 times at this point, planning to get back for another visit this offseason. So the Wolverines have a legitimate shot here. I've interacted a little bit with his dad. Seems like a super friendly guy. I don't think he's going to have, this extreme Penn State bias. So, Michigan's done a fantastic job of recruiting him. Grant Newsome, Michigan's new offensive line coach, is obviously the area recruiter up and down the East Coast and has built a great relationship with Carroll already. He has a pre-existing relationship with Sherrone Moore, who served as his primary recruiter. So Michigan's doing a fantastic job here. And we talk about chemistry on my team, drafting a lot of guys that are friends with each other. And, what better guy to pair with Michael Carroll than Rowan Byrne, another fan favorite, another East Coaster. Rowan Byrne, an on 300 prospect from New York. Had a chance to see him play this year. He was originally listed as a tackle, but definitely projects as more of an interior offensive lineman. Still, that athleticism that had him initially listed as a tackle is definitely apparent, and just a really smart kid, high football IQ, just fits the Michigan culture. I think the Wolverines are trending in the right way with Byrne. The Rutgers is the leader on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine because he's made so many visits there, but I doubt he ends up there. I think Michigan's done a fantastic job. They've already hosted him for 4 visits. He was on campus for Sherrone Moore's first recruiting weekend as head coach. Grant Newsome and Rowan Byrne was the first recruit that Grant Newsome saw as Michigan's offensive line coach. So, they're really high on both Byrne and Carroll, and having those guys have that chemistry in the interior of the offensive line, I think will do great against Zach's defensive line, burying Bobby Kanka and others. So excited about the Carroll Byrne duo in the trenches. So I have two more picks left. So I've
been one. You're just going to do two?
No, I'm not going to go right now. I'm saying, how many do you have left? Do you have two or three?
I have three.
You have three. Okay, so we'll go to your two picks and then my two picks, and then Zach will have the last pick of the draft. So share with us your two picks.
I'm going to stay in the state of Indiana for my next edge rusher, Marion Dye out of Elkhart. He is unranked by On3. That's going to change. He is a 4-star on a couple of recruiting services right now. He's one that I have seen in person. I've seen him lift. He's just one of those guys where you just don't really know how much more muscle mass he can garner. He is just a physical freak. If you watch him on film, he has that ability to play, with his hand in the dirt and then be a stand-up edge. He's able to get to the outside. He's able to disrupt the backfield. He's able to go cross field in order to sack a quarterback or a ball carrier. He's one that Dylan Roney, former pass rush specialist, offered while Dye was on visit for the Purdue game. We saw him in person soon afterwards, and just so much positivity came out of that visit, right? Like these edge rush prospects, they just love talking about just how well Michigan develops that position. Aiden Hutchinson and Rashawn Gary and Kwity Paye, those are just examples of what they see on Sundays and just that road, right? Like they have an opportunity to do the same thing if they do it in Michigan. But, it's interesting. Obviously, Dylan Roney isn't there. Jesse Minter was also assisting with the Dye recruitment, but Wisconsin offered Dye that same fall. So not too long before Michigan did. Obviously Greg Scruggs, who, when he was at Wisconsin at the time, issued that offer. It's still in the early stages of relationship, but this is one much like Damian Shanklin that, you can pick up that pieces, you can pick up where things left off rather quickly just because there's familiarity. So again, even though he's unranked, he has that 4-star potential, and that's what two of the services agree with me. So he's one too that like I hope to see in a camp setting, because I want to see him go one-on-one in person. Hopefully Michigan can stay in this race. They have the lead right now, but again, a lot has changed. It's not a big lead either. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this recruitment, especially with there's a previous background, knowing that Dye has an offer from Wisconsin. And then my second pick, I need to round out my defensive back board. I'm going to go with a familiar name. I'm going to go with Marquise Davis out of Cleveland Heights.
What?
This is a kid who's listed as an athlete.
So you're picking Marquise Davis twice?
This is a kid who can go two ways at the high school level.
Okay, well, that's leave it to Zach to pull off the ultimate weird surprise. Like his ultimate gotcha moment includes drafting a player he already has.
I've seen this kid practice. I have seen this kid's film more often than not. We talk about him a lot as running back, right? There's a reason why Steve Clinkscale was in on him so much. This past season, 2,400 rushing yards, but at the same time, he started for a Cleveland Heights team where he finished with 91 total tackles and I think 3 interceptions. I mean, I think it goes to show just how much athleticism can be put into one person. and just, it makes sense as to why Steve Clisale was high on this kid so much. Michigan, for those who don't know too, Clisale kind of had a relationship or one previous before this Davis recruitment with Cleveland Heights head coach Max Stevens, because Clisale once coached Max Stevens, the head coach of Cleveland Heights' son at Cincinnati, I believe. So there's a lot of there's a lot going into there. Just more on Davis. When you talk to him, the one thing the key word that he always brings up is always violence and aggression. This is a kid, right? Like, you saw it in person for the Ohio State game. That's that kind of kid where you want on your team, but going both ways for that matter. He's the quintessential example of how to be successful, and how to properly, I guess, dominate using physical, quote, violence. Most too are looking at him on the defensive side of the ball for that hybrid linebacker role. And that's one where Michigan signed a group of guys who could play that role as well, including Mason Graham, before he got out of his NLI, Jane Davis. So it's an opportunity, right, for Michigan's defensive staff too to step in and continue making sure that Marquise Davis is high on Michigan. So I have no issues making sure that Marquise Davis doesn't leave the field for my team. I am that high on him.
Well, two things. One, Zach said Jaden Davis got out of his NLI. That was actually Jaden Smith. No, don't panic, anybody. Jaden Davis did not get out of his NLI. That was Jaden Smith. Too many Davises and Smiths and Jadens. But I think even Megan laughed at that pick. So, what's next? Zach picked 2 tight ends last year, and now he goes with the same player. So next year's draft will have an ultra special moment, I guess. My last 2 picks are at wide receiver. I have the luxury of doing that. My first one's Quincy Porter. Obviously, I talked about him a ton on the show. Michigan desperately needs a big-bodied wide receiver this year. Porter is that guy. I mean, 6'3", definitely a big red zone target, but also just terrific at stretching the field, making plays after the catch, kind of like if he bulks up, like, I could see him being like a Terrell Owens. Like, he's that type of guy, just such a dangerous guy after the catch as well. Really good speed, really good route runner for being a bigger guy. He can sink his hips really well in and out of breaks, which is something taller receivers usually struggle with. So Quincy Porter, obviously the take for me, gives me another top 40 recruit, no brainer there. Next for me is another wide receiver in my last pick of the draft. And I already have a Rocket in Rocket Howard. I'm going with another Rocket in Rocket Lockett, Kalik Lockett, out of the great state of Texas from the Dallas area. Shout out to Kalik, man. He is one of the best targets on Michigan's wide receiver board and one of the best kids in the class. Really have had a great time interacting with him so far. Visited Michigan twice last summer. The Wolverines are in second place on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. He has shot up the rankings, the number 52 overall recruit in the country. Almost gave me another top 50 guy here. Lockett's a guy you can put in the slot. He can stretch the field on the outside. He's a former teammate of Alex Orji, so there's already a connection to Michigan. Like I said, he's been on campus twice. Ron Bellamy saw him during the contact period. So, yeah, man, I'm very happy with my last 2 picks of Quincy Porter and Kalik Lockett, getting 2 top 55 players in the country with my last 2 picks, and that rounds out my team. And Zach gets to pick a quarterback with his last pick.
So the rules were he has to visit at least once, right?
Has to visit at least once, and he can't be committed anywhere else.
Okay, cool.
Look at Zach. He's sad.
No, actually. Well, see, I just wanted to make sure what the rules were clear, right? Because my guy currently has the lead for Michigan. Michigan currently has the lead for him on the On3 recruiting prediction for machine. He is from Findlay, Ohio.
He's already eliminated Michigan, so you can't go with Ryan Montgomery either. You can't go with someone that's eliminated Michigan. He did not include Michigan in his top group. Look at Zach trying to skirt around the rules.
No, for real, though. I'm going to go, obviously, with Hassan Longstreet, a 4-star from California. Hassan Longstreet is interesting, right? Like, he leads for Michigan on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. He picked up his offer from Michigan in May, the day after he visited Michigan. So he stayed for 2 days. The second day, he was at that Sound Mind, Sound Body camp, the same one as Andrew Marsh. Seeing him there, he was able to compete and show off and showcase what he can do in front of Kurt Campbell, while a guy like Bryce Underwood was there too. This, for those who don't know too, he plays for a team that isn't afraid of competition. They go through the gauntlet of the Trinity League. They play Bishop Gorman, but his final stats for this past season, 199 over 298, 3,000 yards passing, 24 touchdowns. He has dual threat capabilities too, much like Carter Smith. He carried the ball 85 times for 645 yards and 7 touchdowns. When you watch him on film, obviously throwing mechanics need to get fine-tuned. Kind of dips the ball a little bit when he drops back, but as a thrower, he has the velocity. He's able to go deep with his passes. When he tucks it and runs, he's so elusive too in the open field. He's able to break tackles and, pick up big gains. When he's in the pocket too, he's very, very confident, very poised and patient. But he's able to throw, off his back shoulder or throw on the run too. You see a couple times where he has to escape after less than a couple seconds in the pocket. It'll be interesting too with Michigan. They have Carter Smith. They're very high on him, as they should, as fans should as well, with just his potential. But if Michigan does want to go with a 2-quarterback class, obviously Hassan Longstreet is the guy for that. With this roster too right now, there's no transfer coming in, like a scholarship transfer quarterback that's coming in for the 24 season. After next year, it's, Jack Tuttle or something like him. He's not going to be on the team. So you want depth. You want to make sure you have the back end of your quarterback room, secured. And I feel like if you want 2 quarterbacks, you want guys with, ceiling is the sky's the limit in terms of just potential. I think that goes hand in hand with people like Carter Smith and Hassan Longstreet. So that'll be my quarterback. And I look forward to seeing him, or imagining him, right, handing the ball off to Marquise Davis or throwing it deep to Talon Taylor and Andrew Marsh.
Well, that completes the draft. Obviously, I dominated Zach for the second straight year. So just so you guys know, my completed team is Carter Smith, Iverson Howard, Quincy Porter, Khalid Lockett, Andrew Babalola, Michael Carroll, Rowan Byrne. Defensively, we have Nathaniel Marshall, Ethan Utley, Jalen Williams. Linebackers, Noah McHale, and secondaries, DJ Pickett, Chris Ewald, and Dorian Brew. You want to read off your team really quick, Zach?
No, you're on a roll, but yeah, I can go for it. At quarterback, Hassan Longstreet. At running back, Marquise Davis. At wide receivers, Andrew Marsh and Talon Taylor. At offensive line, Avery Gash, S.J. Alafatuli, David Sanders. At defensive back, we have Marquise Davis again, Dwayne Galloway. Dwayne Galloway and Trey McNutt. At linebacker, Kamar Archie. And then at defensive line, Damian Shanklin, Marion Dye, and Bobby King.
All right. So let us know in the comments who you think won. We'll post them on Twitter as well. And as always, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. Subscribe to the Wolverine.com for just $1 for 1 month. And quick programming note, We will not have a show tomorrow. This one went super long. Our producer, Megan, looks vividly angry in the background. She's ready to get out of here. So we will not have a show tomorrow. I'll actually be traveling, so you can get some road intel over at the Wolverine. And next week, I am going on vacation to the Caribbean. Do you say Caribbean, Zach, or do you say Caribbean? Are you like Pirates of the Caribbean style, or do you say it properly?
I mean, Caribbean kind of sounds kind of like, you know, it's like caramel and caramel. Like, just say caramel. Like, just say just say Caribbean.
All right. Well, I will be being a pirate in the Caribbean, and we will in the Caribbean. I'm sorry, whatever you want to say. So we won't have any shows next week. So we will be back in March. So if you want Michigan recruiting information and you're starved for it, it's the perfect time to go over to the Wolverine.com and subscribe for $1 for 1 month. We will see you next month.